Welcome to True and Unpolished. Through this podcast, our intention is to uplift, amuse, and inspire you to create more of a life you'll love. Let's get authentic, everybody. Today's episode is brought to you by Cusp Culture. Visit them online at cuspculture.com. Hi there, everybody. It's Lydia here. And you are about to hear a conversation that we have with one of Mary's peeps again, Amy Stafford. And I just want to tell you that this episode is going to start a little bit differently. We give you kind of a behind the scenes of what happened just prior to our recording. And in that explanation, we mention drawing a card. And I just want to say that we do not believe that that cards give you guidance, that come from outside of you. That oftentimes when we say that we draw a card, we have these card decks, and it's a way of recognizing that we have messages from our soul and that life is talking to us all the time, and that the cards are just a tool that we can use to allow our soul to guide us and to talk to us. So when you hear us talk about the drawing of a card, I just want you to know that in no way do we think that these cards are prophetic. What we know is that these cards can speak to us just like nature can, just like a friend can give us the right answer, the thing that our soul wants us to know. It's the exact same thing. So, okay, enough qualifying. Sit back, take a listen. So, Amy, I want to tell everybody before I get you to share that just a minute ago, we start with an intention. Each podcast, Mary and I start with an intention. Anytime we have a guest, we start with an intention. And before we started talking to you all, we were talking about what we're going to talk about, because Amy is an amazing person that has so many different things that we could talk about that would be helpful and super interesting to everybody, that we were trying to figure out, well, which one are we going to do and what are we going to talk about? And ultimately, this is probably going to be 2 episodes and not 1, because that's how interesting Amy is. And so we said our intention to be helpful. And then intuitively, I felt like, Mary should draw a card. And so she drew a card, and the card, I intuitively felt like the card was going to kind of guide us as to like which topic to go with. And in fact, it did, something really resonated within Amy, and she knew, what she wanted to share with us this time. So, Amy, talk to us.
As we were going through the card and Mary was reading what it was stating out loud, which was focused on living in peace and living intentionally and making choices based on internal peace, because it comes from within. As I was hearing those words, it struck a chord, pretty deep chord. I was actually tearing up a little bit, knowing which topic we're going to discuss today. And so the topic that we settled on was my divorce that I went through in 2020. I was married to my ex-husband for 18 years. We have 2 daughters, a 14-year-old, now 15, and 9-year-old. And last year, we reached a point in our relationship where mutually we agreed that we were no longer meant to be living together as a married couple. There were quite a few things that led up to that. Obviously, as any relationship, you don't just wake up one morning and find something wrong in that relationship. I mean, plenty of things over 18 years can lead up to it. And we had our share of those things. And I would say for several years, it took several years for us to finally come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
And when we did, it was in a conversation. We both sat down one night in February last year and just looked at each other and recognized where we were at, and that was our next step moving forward.
Yeah.
So even though it was mutual, it was amicable, that conversation still struck a note of panic
Sure.
I'd been married for 18 years. That's what I knew.
Yeah.
And then the first thought, obviously, is your daughters. Like, am I
Yeah.
really going to do this to them? Is it the right thing for them, for us? So I really did. We didn't immediately move forward into the steps of our divorce, but we.
Well, there was also a pandemic just starting.
Yes.
Oh, right. February 2020. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh my.
Yes. So that was going on. This conversation happened in February. We hadn't gone into the quarantine yet. That was in March.
Right.
So we didn't even know it was really coming.
Right.
I don't even think I had really heard of COVID yet when we had that conversation. But I was already in quite a bit of flux because had just graduated with my master's in nutrition, and I was in the process of getting my own business up and running. So I was applying for my license with the state of Washington and going through all those steps to start my business.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of instability I felt. Yeah. And then we added the divorce to the picture. So I did spend several months honestly, I would say there was deep panic. Yeah. There was sadness, definitely, because, you're ending something that has been in existence for so long.
Yeah.
You're breaking up the family that your daughters know.
Right.
And you're starting forward into the great unknown.
Yeah.
You really don't know. And I've never been one to really sink deep into myself until this experience. I've always been mindful and aware, but this experience, I had to go really deep. Yeah. I had to go deep because I had to know that all of these choices that I had to start making were the right ones. Right. Because they were all big.
Yeah.
All of them.
Right.
The dissolution of a family. Another story off on the side was because of COVID, the process of me starting my business got halted. The state, with all of the workers now working remotely, and that their whole process changing, they lost all of my paperwork, which delayed my license by about 3 months. And so this put me in this situation of going forward with a divorce, having those conversations with my ex-husband. And now all of a sudden I didn't have a future where I knew where my income was going to come from.
Right. And you just spent all this time and energy and into creating this business that now they've lost your paperwork.
Right. And it came to a sudden halt because you can't practice. Right. In Washington State without that. So when they told me that it would be June or July before I could even get my license, I knew I needed to come up with something else. And so that is really that point where I did start recognizing that I had a lot of tough decisions, but I needed to be at peace with whatever I accepted. Yeah. And it's scary.
Yeah. So what, did you have a process? Like, what did you do with decisions, each one of these, which I'm sure there were so many little ones and big ones, even in a given day.
I learned to listen to my own inner voice, first of all.
Right.
But mostly what I really, truly learned was sitting in that place of discomfort with fear, with all those unknowns, and not rushing into decision.
Yeah.
Because I felt that panic.
Right.
I felt intuitively that I needed to just pause.
Right.
And wait. And that was the hardest part because I was waiting for my inner voice to say, this is the one.
Mayor.
So I've known Amy for almost 10 years. And we had a 2-year period where they lived in my hometown. And our daughters were the sweetest, best friends. And we became very close. And there was a whole community of people And at the time I was married as well. And so we had this sweet little, for 2 years, this sweet little group of people that were actually consciously living. We talked about the things that you and I talk about, Lydia. We talked about, living mindfully. And Amy had a whole different experience than I'd had. And so we were able to kind of teach each other what we individually knew, and then kind of learn from each other and be able to kind of grow together. And so I think one of the things, and since they moved, we've kept in touch, but not as regularly as we'd like until the last year. I think we've had more contact in the last year or so. But one of the things that I think is really interesting and neat about these kinds of friendships, where I would say it's a conscious friendship, the term spiritual partnership is one that we've talked about. But in what I've witnessed in Amy is, because she said the thing about her intention, listening to her inner voice. I think she was honing it back then, and it was just in a different way. And so what she was able to do was kind of move into this experience. And now, I've witnessed her kind of transform. But I think, I don't know what you think about this, Amy, but I think it comes from a lot, and Lydia and I talked a little bit about this last week too, but it comes from practice over the last, I don't know how many years you've been doing inner work, working on yourself. But it appears that this has been really easy for you, and I know that is not the case. Having gone through this myself, and not a very sometimes graceful way, I get the pain of it, but to witness somebody who seems to have done it really easily.
I think what stood out to me about what you said, Amy, is that part of, and this is certainly my experience, is that part of getting in touch with that inner voice, that intuitive voice, whatever you call it, your soul. People use all kinds of different words, but part of that is not rushing. It is actually ignoring that voice of panic and that says, move, act now, make the choice, make the decision, and saying no, and really allowing yourself to be, like you said, sit in the discomfort of the not knowing, like the place in between, that in between place. And Mary and I actually talked about this, I think a few episodes ago, where it's, there is in transformation, like there is a neutral period, the neutral zone, and people want to rush through this neutral zone. They want to rush through it. And actually the neutral zone, it's where a lot, it kind of appears like nothing's going on, like no steps are being made. But in truth, that's where the transformation is happening. It's in that neutral zone, but we have to have that ability to sit in the panic, to sit in the uncertainty and the not knowing.
And it's not easy. And I'll come back to that, Lydia. But before I do, I want to speak to what Mary brought up. I do think that I was working on it when we first met. And a lot of it was due to you, actually. That was what my friendship with you has gifted me, is learning how to be mindful and paying more attention to that and, living consciously and mindfully and all that. And that is all due to my friendship with Mary over the last decade or so. So thank you.
Oh, that's nice to hear. Thank you.
I do think that it played a huge role in how it went for me last year. I think I was able to sit in that neutral space, in that place of sometimes very intense discomfort. And even being in that space added another layer of panic over top of already having to make that decision in the first place.
Right.
As you're sitting still you recognize the fact that you're not moving forward.
Yeah.
And so there's that panic of, should I be doing something? Oh, wait, I should be doing something now. But then you're not feeling, I wasn't hearing the right thing to do yet. Like it just, nothing was hitting me as it was the right choice yet. And so I would just continue to sit in that discomfort. And it is not easy.
Right.
It's really difficult, especially when you feel you're watching your life move. It doesn't stop when you stop to sit in that place. And my divorce was very fast. So we had our discussion in February, and by August, we were officially legally divorced.
Wow. Yeah.
And, we didn't involve any lawyers or anything. We did it. We mediated ourselves, and it was amicable, but it was fast. It was all of those big decisions. Sometimes I would be within days of that decision really needing to be made before the right one would come to me and present itself. Come back to the word peace, though. Even with all of that chaos, the pandemic, all of the life changes, watching, what my daughters were going through, and I can tell you, sitting them down and having those conversations was not easy.
Yeah.
But there was underlying all of it, because I knew I was doing this consciously. I was paying attention to the choices I was making and accepting them as I did make them, even if they took my life and sent it in a completely different direction. There was peace underlying all of it.
Yeah.
Almost through the entire process. Sometimes I had to really quiet down to feel it, but it was there. And that's why that card that was pulled today, like it brought tears to my eyes to hear it said that way.
Oh, and I think, as an observer, I think that is what I've witnessed is the peace. And that's why you've made it look easy, not because it was easy, not because there was no pain, but because you have been present for the process and accepting and allowing for whatever was going to unfold. The whole thing with your job, I don't know if we want to talk about that, but what happened with your license and all that.
Yeah, the papers being lost. Tell us about the papers being lost. So now what happened? What's going on simultaneously with your work while this is
right? Well, I'm actually a stay-at-home mom at this point. So
okay.
I do not have my own source of income yet. My nutrition consulting business was going to become my independent source of income. But with the pandemic, with my license being lost, when May rolled around, I was looking at the fact that I was moving out in July into my own place. And I needed to completely switch gears.
Yeah.
I had to, and I spent a week, there were tears, there was panic, there was...
I bet anger.
I had
those people for losing your papers.
There was that, absolutely, because here I had dedicated, so much of my life and my passion in nutrition to get my degree, and I wanted to get out there and help people. And I was being told that, no, this is not for you right now.
Yeah.
That you're not, this is not the path you are supposed to be walking at this point.
Wow.
And it was screaming it at me. And I did resist. It was May before I started pushing my resume out. And I had to, first I started trying to push a nutrition resume out and tried as hard as I could to stay in that field. And that it wasn't panning out. So then I went and relied back on my time as an Army officer, and which, there was a 12-year, 14-year gap. So I didn't know how that was going to be perceived as this resume was going out. So I just threw out a bunch of resumes everywhere I could. And it was the first weekend in June. I went for a weekend away by myself to just unplug. I needed to just stop, to step away from my environment, to just be silent. And so I escaped up to a small little room, Airbnb up in West Seattle, unplugged completely, turned my phone off, turned my computer off, and just sat. Well, I walked around a lot. I wasn't just sitting for 3 days.
To find peace within.
To find peace. Because I had made, at that point, I had made this decision. I was going in a completely different direction now, and I needed to accept it. That was what this weekend was really about. And I came back from that weekend. Monday afternoon, I had my first call based on those resumes I had put out. Tuesday, I had 2 more. I had 3 interviews in 3 days. And Tuesday night, I was offered a job and asked to start the next day. That is the job I'm working at now. I told them I couldn't start the next day. I needed to figure out what to do with my kids, but I did start the end of that week. It was a whirlwind. My head spun for a while.
And since you've gotten promoted, right?
Mm-hmm. Excited to say, because that is just such a profound example of acceptance and surrender. Like, you went away for a weekend, and it was for the expressed purpose of being okay with this kind of switching gears. And switching gears is just way too light a way to put it. Like, you were following your passion with nutrition. You were, this was what you felt like your heart service was going to be. And so then the door was closing, and you knew instinctively, intuitively, that you had to get to a place of accepting it. And so then after this weekend of walking around and accepting it, you get these interviews with a 12-year resume gap. Many of us fear that kind of thing. Many women out there can relate to this, that they stop working, they take care of their children, and then try to go back out there into the world. And then you get, by what is it, Wednesday, you have a job, and they say, want to start tomorrow? That's amazing.
So what happened to the paperwork?
So I signed my employee agreement on Wednesday and started Thursday afternoon, showed up at the company to meet the people I was going to be working with. Mm-hmm. And Friday checked my mail, and my license paperwork was in there.
Oh my God.
The nutrition license. That.
And what happened then? Did you laugh? Did you cry?
I did. No, I kind of all of it. It was more just like eyes to the heavens and like, okay, like what?
Like, what is this?
Yeah. So,
wow.
but I had fully accepted where I was, and I truly, to this day, am okay with the direction I headed in.
Yeah.
I love my job. I love the people I work with. I learn something new every day. Because, leadership is another passion of mine, if I'm being honest. And so it just being able to switch gears into something I still enjoy was partly why it was so easy to accept. But I didn't know that when I was accepting it.
Yeah.
Because you're in a leadership position where you are now. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So actually it's not just that nutrition is your one and only passion. And what this points to is something that I love too, that the movie Soul, I think, illustrates so much. It's that we don't have a purpose. Like, our purpose is to show up as the uniqueness that is us, with our talents and our abilities to whatever is in front of us. Right. And so the recognition, like maybe even the lesson is, look, Amy, you don't have, you getting that license on Friday. It was like the universe saying, you don't have one purpose. Like, your purpose is Amy, and bring the gift of Amy and her presence and consciousness and obvious deep consciousness, because of the way that you navigated all this, to whatever it is that you're doing.
I really like the idea that we don't have a singular purpose.
Yeah. I think
that we do show up and with whatever gifts we're given.
Yes.
Just use them in the best way that you can in that moment.
Yeah. And then you find purpose in your life because you're showing up in that way, not because you're doing a certain thing, but because you're showing up.
And I don't think we always know what our actual purpose is in those moments. I think we don't always recognize how we may be touching somebody else's life.
So I have a question. Do you have any advice for somebody that's going through a divorce or separation to make it, I know easier isn't really the right word, but to the path of least pain and resistance?
I think the first thing I would say is everybody's divorce is different, because everybody's situation leading into that divorce, all of the personalities involved, the external environment that they're in at that moment is different. But there's always going to be pain, anger, hurt, all of those strong emotions are there. And I think if I were to give one piece of advice, it would be to pause and step back and evaluate yourself and how you're coming forward into that divorce. What are the reasons behind why you're making that choice? And maybe that choice was taken from you. Maybe you didn't get a chance to even make that choice. It was made for you. But can you get yourself to a place of acceptance with it? Because whatever the situation was, maybe that's where you need to be. You need to be going into that divorce, trying to step away from your own life, look back at yourself and look at your own behavior and your own decisions. And can you be happy with what you're doing and what those decisions you're making in that time? Because I think doing that helps navigate as peacefully as possible between the two parties in the divorce. Taking that pause maybe helps calm down those strong emotions that can make it really volatile.
Well, and I think the card, Find Peace Within, was what life gave us right before we started this. So
yeah. And I would say, in my hearing you say that it is important to, because at least, I, am married and not divorced. And I had a little trial run when I was 21, which lasted for a hot minute, but it really can't be counted. But what I would say is that in all of my relationships that I ended, part of how I got there and could be at peace, because I've actually been engaged a handful of times. This is another whole nother podcast, everybody, Runaway Bride. But the point is that when I got to that place, it was, I was able to be at peace with the choice because I was able to take ownership of my part in getting me there. Like, we're here, we're at the place where this can't go on. Like, it's time for us to part, and it's not going to work. I'm going to carry it with me if I don't own my stuff, if I don't own how I got here, because I wasn't, I didn't get here, with just this person perpetrating something on me. I had a part in it. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yes, I think that's a big part of it. And that taking ownership is not just, from the relationship standpoint, but also your actions during and after the divorce as well, I think.
Yeah.
Don't let the act of divorce or the pain and uncertainty and, fear derail your life. Find that peace and find a way to navigate through it.
But at the same time, you said you're going to have to, you might have to pause. So there is derailment.
There is derailment. Well, okay, there is derailment. Yes.
Living
obviously, just
right?
look at my story. It was completely derailed. If you could look at it in another way and say, well, your life was completely thrown off track.
Yeah.
But I'm not looking at that as a bad thing. That's a conscious decision to accept it and not look at that as something negative.
Yeah. So in the act of accepting the derailment as purposeful, you're not derailed anymore.
I'm not emotionally derailed.
Right.
I am. Yeah. Right. I'm at peace. I'm at peace.
And I would just say too, that anybody going through this, or anyone that has gone through this, self-compassion and self-love and not holding ourselves to some high standard, like, it's a very difficult thing to go through. And Amy, I just want to say, I am so grateful to you for being willing to talk about this, because it is difficult to find anyone who is willing to talk about this. And so many people navigate things like this, whether it's the divorce part of your story or the going down a track and feeling very on purpose with this one certain goal of what they will do in life, and then having that door kind of shut. So I am so grateful to you for just your willingness to be vulnerable and to talk about these things. It is such a gift. And I know I can feel that this is going to be truly helpful to people. So, everybody, thank you, Amy, for being here. And Mare, as always, your peeps never disappoint. You have been listening to True and Unpolished, the podcast. Let's see what happens next.